Hi, Misha here. And something everyone who knows me knows about me is I like space. In fact, that's really how this personal channel got started. I wanted to talk about the Eagle Moss models. One of my very first videos was on the BSG ones from them, the Star Trek ones, but also real world space. One of my earliest videos was also on the various space capsules. It's been an interest of mine. Put it to you like this. I remember my third birthday party. It's one of my earliest relatively clear memories in getting I don't know, Playmates or whatever set of like a fictitious moon base. And I remember getting the big G.I. Joe and a couple of little ones as a kid, and those be favorite toys. Even went to Houston when I was, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 9, and to the NASA Center down there, which was one of my favorite trips as a young person. But these days, NASA stuff, it's been out of favor for a while. Superheroes, and kind of rightfully so. Ever since the end of the shuttle program in 2011, it's been kind of dormant in America. Although there's been a lot of stuff going on with like rovers, which is cool, but not as imagination catching for kids. Okay, so the point of this video, I wanted to get various models of spacecraft, but I was having a hard time. I've been doing this channel for, 5 years now? And from the get-go, it was really hard to find models. I first started off trying diecast. Well, that would lead you to Dragon. But Dragon, unfortunately, haven't really made that many in recent years. A lot of them are the 1/400 scale, which are tiny rockets. They did do some larger 1/72 scale and even 1/48 scale, but even back then they were very expensive, and today they are astronomically high. For example, there's Saturn V and 1/72. While it is impressive, it's all plastic and it's $400. Sorry, not going to do that. You might, and I'm sure it's awesome, but that's a car payment. Can't do it. I've also noticed with Dragon, the plastic they use is kind of brittle, which is hard when you're blind. I need to feel stuff. Hobby Master and Corgi, I don't routinely break those. Their plastic is pretty good, but Dragon, I don't know. So between being brittle and just expensive, I have kind of a love-hate with them. Still had to pick up some cool stuff like the Apollo CSM. I think I got Apollo 7 or 8 without the module, but it's what I could find. I also picked up the mahogany models. You saw some, but they were kind of expensive, 100, 150, $200. That was in 2019, and when I looked recently, they're all gone. I don't know if they're going to do another batch, but I thought about getting the Saturn 1B or the Mercury Atlas, which I didn't pick up back when because I just couldn't afford to, and they're nowhere to be found, unfortunately. Plus, with the mahogany, they look nice, they're painted well, but texture-wise, there's not much going on. What to do? I started really getting desperate, looking around and around, and so I eventually turned my gaze from models, die-cast, mahogany, even plastic. Remember, I can't paint. I can glue pretty good, but I can't paint. And looking at toys. Now, there are very, very few current NASA toys. Again, it's just kind of not the mode. It'd be interesting to see with upcoming SpaceX stuff if maybe that'll reinvigorate interest, but for now, not much. But then I stumbled across this brand here. And I just picked this one out randomly because it's still in the packaging. This goes by a few names. Space Voyagers. Sometimes this is the sub-series known as Adventure Fleet. There's also a sub-series called Astro Squad. And then the main line is just called Space Voyagers Basics or whatever, just the standard one. Most come in these kinds of cards, although some kind of come in clamshell. Inexpensive packaging, definitely a toy. But these were licensed by, approved by NASA, and they were created using NASA drawings and prints. That's not to say they're going to be 100% accurate, because they were also created on a budget. And they usually say either ages 4 and up or 6 and up. Some of the more complicated ones say like 10 and up or whatever. When I agree, they do kind of verge. Some are more toy, some are more model. They're kind of straddling that thing. Interesting. These were made between 1998 and 2008. Seems to be the most recent. With this particular one here, the manned space flight collection, I think coming out around 2003. So kind of right in the middle of the line. And as you can see, we have 5 reasonably sized rockets in here. They're 4 to 6 inches, 5. I mean, good size. They're generally bigger than the 1/400 scale Dragon, but they are plastic. So let's start here with these. But we're going to look at pretty much the entire Action Products, that's the manufacturer, Space Voyagers series, because there is nothing to speak of on the internet. There's only 1 or 2 videos on YouTube, only but a couple of things that they did, one of their most impressive ones to be sure. And there's basically no mention of them on websites to speak of, except some old eBay listings and Amazon listings. And even now, you can still find them carded. Like, I found this one for $15. But then I actually ran across a bulk deal of 5 of these, all different ones, for $25. So, yeah, even today, they're kind of like space micro machines. And I thought it would be cool to document them. And I will be using them in various videos talking about space capsules, rockets, space suits, and, talking about the different sizes and types and qualities, because they do kind of range based on age and maturity and all that. But we're all kids around here, and I had to buy a lot of this stuff because the inner kid in me would never forgive me. If these had been out when I was a kid, I can almost promise you they would have been my favorite toys. So let's kind of crack it open and see how authentic, accurate they are, and how durable they might be. So here we have it ripped off the card. Pretty standard packaging. Nothing special, but adequate enough to keep these safe for 20 years until I rip them open. So let's see what we have here. Pop these out, the little blisters, and see, 1, how authentic they are, and 2, how well constructed or not they are. First up, Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom's Mercury Redstone. This was directly built from a missile with a capsule on top, and these were for very short, roughly 15-minute suborbital flights. Still going across the line into space, but not near as far as Yuri Gagarin, who launched a month earlier. But it was America's first. So what do we have here? Well, the main body is plastic. It's quite light. These fins are plastic. And luckily, honestly, our escape tower is kind of a flexible, rubbery plastic material. Relatively straight out of the box. It's a little bit bowed, but hot water would take care of that. Not bad for as old as it is. It's not dried out or stiff, though. And it's a good size. I mean, it's, yeah. It's almost like if Eagle Moss did this size, it would be here. It's not quite the detail level of Eagle Moss, but it's not priced there either. There's a little bit of product placement writing on the side. And there's not much going on in the way of engines on these. But that's because they wanted to be able to sit on a desk or table. What I think I'll probably do is get a little blue tack and just stick them somewhere, because, even though this balances quite well, it could easily get knocked over. especially by yours truly. So that was our first manned vehicle, even if it didn't go too far or too fast. Next up, we have Mercury Atlas. And I really wish I had bought this one in the Executive or Mastercraft, the Mahogany series, but I just couldn't afford it. In fact, actually, the three I bought, the Redstone, the Gemini, and the Saturn V, I put on a payment plan because it was an Amazon Day thing. I don't want to make it sound like they're grossly expensive, but when you buy three, it was $500 total with shipping. So unfortunately, I couldn't buy all of the ones they had, including this one. And then when I went back to buy it 6 months later, they were already sold out and they haven't come back. So this is one I don't actually have any representation of at all in my collection. It has some basic engines on the bottom, but again, they're flat, so they'll sit. This is a 1.5 stage, kind of a strapped-on booster system. And this would get John Glenn and subsequent other Mercury astronauts to orbit. So quite a bit more payload in the Mercury capsule. Same escape tower, same kind of rubberized plastic. The rest of the body is a hard plastic. I'm not sure if it's solid or hollow. If it's hollow, it's not very hollow. It's got some weight to it, I'm not going to lie. It might be solid. If it's hollow, it doesn't feel horrible. That's one reason I'm not really crazy about the Dragon plastic models. They look nice, I'm sure, but when you go to touch them, like that's how I see, they're hollow plastic and they just don't feel worth what they go for. Personal opinion. Again, I'm sure looking at them, they're great. But no, it's great that they did include this version of Mercury because it's often overlooked. Speaking of often overlooked, Gemini, or Gemini. What an interesting rocket. The Titan II. Later unmanneds would also use Titan III in a similar way. Very different. Notice there's no fins. Now, one thing I'll say, my Mahogany version only has 2 engines on the bottom, and all the ones I've heard of only had 2 engines, but this one has 4. Guys, let me know, was there a version of the Titan that had 4, or did they just do it on this so it would halfway sit up? Now, on this kind of carpet, it won't, but on a desk, it will, actually. I just tried it. So I'm wondering if maybe they used a little bit of creative license there and gave it 4 bells so it would actually have a halfway, because with just 2 there's no way it would ever sit on anything. A little bit bigger, thicker. Now notice there's no escape tower. That's because this didn't use them. It used ejection seats. Well, in theory, in practice it would have turned the astronauts into fireworks if they had actually needed to use the ejection seats. This thing on top, it's actually a little shroud for a service module that was at the front, docking and other things. It's a good size. It's a little thicker. And Gemini was really the workhorse. 12 missions, 10 of them were crewed, and considering they were only flying not even 2 years, they got a lot done. Not always successful, but no one was killed, and this is really where they figured out how they were going to get to the moon. For what it's worth, the very first crewed Gemini flight had Gus Grissom as commander. Next up, Saturn V. So, since we're kind of doing the same overall length, this one is by necessity smaller scale. But, not bad. You can see that the stage is here, the taper. They even gave it a little bit of an ejection or emergency tower. But this time, because it's so small, it's not of that rubbery plastic, it's actually just part of the capsule. because of how big this would have been, yeah, the details are somewhat lacking, and I have other Saturn V's that are more impressive, but it's in the set, and it's nice to have. Very iconic, maybe one of the most impressive machines the United States has ever made. True 3-stage, even 4 if you want to count the end. Extremely powerful and extremely expensive machines. Now this is the Saturn V version. I do wish the set included the Saturn 1B, which was the version used to get to orbit only, not to go to the moon. A little smaller, a little different. But, oh well. It's nice that they included it. And we come to the final one. And the one that flew for the longest and the most times. The Space Shuttle, the STS. And it's in launch configuration. Or the full stack. Comes with this piece around it. Because this is one of the few that has some kind of features, as it should. Size-wise, it's by the biggest. It's got the most going on because it's basically 4 vehicles in one. Before you do any further, you can see here, the engines are flat. Not much going on there. I think they kind of expect you to, sit it like that. It's a small little shuttle. Detail is acceptable, but not awesome. The tank's pretty good. The tank, it definitely is hollow. Boosters may not be. I don't know of any model that has a solid fuel tank because it would be egregiously heavy, except for maybe the mahogany ones. Let's cut this and we'll get right back. Alrighty. Here you go. It's got some basic panel lines for the bay. But of course, with these you always have to wonder, does it separate? Because in the way the shuttle launches, this is the configuration, relying on the solid rocket boosters. But they would quickly detach, and they do. You actually push down, maybe, come on, and then they come out. So when you drop these off, there's little holes to reattach, and in real life these would fall to earth and be reused. That does leave these latches on the side of the tank. I kind of wish they would have reversed that, leaving the latches on the side of the boosters, because after they detach, this would continue on with the shuttle for a bit, because it would use its main thrusters in the back, the cluster of 3, to get up into orbit. And then once the fuel is exhausted there, that's when your orbiter detached. And it slides off too. Come on. Well, in theory, there we go. A little bit stiff. And I don't mind the pegs being on the tank for this one, because you wouldn't ever really want to display the tank by itself if you wanted to display the orbiter. So it comes apart, and a lot of these, when you get them, they're just little pegs. I like that they actually have kind of a cheap, effective latching system, because pegs wear out, and I'm not saying these wouldn't over time, but at least it gives you a fighting chance, and you can display it how you want. So, what do you think? And here they are lined up. Obviously, they're not to scale with each other, but, I mean, what do you expect? They're kind of like the Corgi showcase, where they're sized to fit the box. And again, these are intended as, let's say, educational toys or simple little ornaments or desk models. In some ways, I think Atlas might be the biggest one. Well, except for the shuttle. But no, I wanted to share these with you because I don't think there's anything out there on this little set. Now, most of what we'll be talking about in the Action Products Space Voyagers line will be astronauts and lunar equipment and things like that. So you'll see this series and its various sublines and iterations in several upcoming videos. But since I had this one still in the package, it seemed like a good time to do a unboxing for you. Or uncarding, decarding. And again, it's not a super rare thing as far as I know, or something that's ever going to go up crazy in value, because unfortunately, astronaut stuff, NASA stuff, space stuff isn't in vogue right now. But that's okay. I have loved it for 40 years and will probably continue to do so for, so many reasons. Anyway, appreciate you hanging out with me. This is Misha. Catch you very soon. Next time.